Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host, and we're just going to get right into the show. We've got quite a show. We've got all sorts of issues. The main issue that we're interested in is here in the city of Portland. We've become nationalized overnight. The little city of roses. We had nothing to do with all of the activities until all of a sudden of late. Wow. Give me a break. I think it's still the city of roses because I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere either. Okay. But anyway, what we're going to do today, we get a feeling of where are we? And in all due respect, that's really what we're going to be doing today. Welcome, Pastor. How you doing?
Great, Bruce. Good to be.
Pastor, there he is, right there.
Absolutely good to be here.
Like I say, bear with me. This is community television too, by the way. We're not going to have any ads or anything of that nature. We're just going to get right down to making people feel very relaxed out there in the community, and so they're listening to what your word is all about. So what we're going to do is just go on and then right up front with you. And everyone knows you. Right up front, everybody knows you. And I'm very familiar with you. Got the community. What's it? Ministerial Alliance. What's it? The Ministerial Alliance? Not Ministerial Alliance.
Ecumenical Ministries.
Ecumenical Ministries. Right. Oregon. In fact, one of the directors at that point in time was from Houston, Texas, who I knew real well. Isn't that something? That's where I was from that particular area. So we spent some time together.
Yeah, you're talking about David, who was the head of our organization for a while.
Right, exactly. Well, Matt, look here, why don't you just sort of introduce yourself and say a couple of words about who you are and your church, your great church over there. And then after you've done that for a bit, then we'll just get right on into our community and what do you feel about the community and where we're going? Okay?
No, first of all, thank you, Bruce, for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for your audience who's paying close attention to what's going on in the region. And I want to say to each of the members of the audience who watch this program that Bruce has been teasing me a little bit about coming to church. And I want to be clear, if Bruce really wants to go to heaven, he's got to go through Vancouver Avenue to get there. So he hasn't showed up yet, so I'm a little worried about him. But I'm grateful to be here with you tonight. There are so many issues, so many things that are going on. I'd like, if you allow, Bruce, just to say that we love Portland. We love Oregon. We love the country. And we want to do everything that we can to be supportive of what this country and its ideals are all about. It takes all of us. In a meeting earlier today, I reminded people I'm a real supporter of people who are protesting peacefully downtown. I said if they are, in fact, on the street 365 days a year peacefully, I'm good with that. I'm always concerned about people during COVID-19 assembling too close together, but it's very important that we use that right of peaceful assembly. I am not at all pleased with the amount of fire burning and buildings being, folks throwing things through glass and looting the buildings and things of that nature. And I know that the narrative I've received back is that, Pastor, we don't care about the buildings. We really don't, because you can always rebuild the buildings. But what I tell them is that you need to understand that that building houses somebody who's working there and they can't work from home. What about the people whose jobs you just took because they can't work from home? And what about the folks who really depend on being able to go to work so they can take care of their families? And so I don't buy the argument that the building doesn't matter. The building absolutely matters, and we need to be careful of that. But that's also the same thing that I've said to peaceful protesters. I said, if you're being asked not to block traffic, not to stop traffic on one of the bridges and stuff, pay attention to that, because somebody in that traffic that we know that you are doing your protest, but somebody is trying to get to work. Somebody's late for work. Somebody is trying to babysit somebody's kids, and somebody is coming home from work and they're already tired. So let's be clear. It's important that we think about both the message that we want to get across, as well as the opportunity to remember how it impacts somebody else. So those are my at least opening remarks.
Yeah, opening remarks. Okay, good. Well, look, you know, and I know you. What about the Northeast Portland community and the Black Lives Matter situation? Definition of Black Lives as it relates to Portland.
Yeah, first of all, I am extremely pleased that not only has Portland become woke about Black Lives Matter, and quite frankly, let me be clear and transparent, because I was concerned 4 or 5 years ago when Black Lives Matter first started that we were really segmenting ourselves and not respecting the fact that all lives matter. And in fact, I recall a group of people getting upset with me because I said that. The George Floyd incident reminds us all that if we can't make Black Lives Matter, we're in serious trouble as a country. As we think about that 8 minutes and 45 or 46 seconds that police officer kept his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck and did not flinch at all, literally at one point put his hands in his pocket while he was taking Mr. Floyd's life, hearing Mr. Floyd's plea for life, as well as people around him. And it didn't seem to bother him. It just reminded me of what I have seen through the history of videos that we get to see of Bull Connor. Bull Connor said when he was tossing the police dogs and fire hoses on the peaceful protesters in Birmingham, Alabama in the early 60s, he said, it's a matter of mind over matter. I don't mind and you don't matter. And that is exactly what that police officer's face said to the nation and the world. Mr. Floyd, you don't matter. And when that created a resurgence of Black Lives Matter, I have to tell you that I was totally and completely on board. I still am. And in fact, what's been heartening for me, and I'm sure all of you, is that as you drive around the Portland area, it's not just among Black houses that you see, Black and brown houses that you see Black Lives Matter. You see a number of our allies in the white community who also have Black Lives Matter posters in their windows. And it tells me that finally we are at a place where we have an opportunity for this country to reckon itself for the whole reason why we exist in the first place, for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Bruce, I can tell you that one of the really heartening experiences I had is that we went over to the Dalles to buy cherries this summer. And I would never have assumed that in the Dalles, I was going to see Black Lives Matter posters. But trust me, both in the city of the Dalles and out in the country, there were signs that said the same thing. And I think that there are a number of people who have said, while they may not aspire or, believe in all 13 tenets of what the Black Lives Matter ethos is, I think they believe in the same process of the fact that all of us should, and that is that if Black Lives Matter, and if we are successful in helping this country reckon its relationship with its Black brothers and sisters and brown brothers and sisters, that all ships will rise. And that's what I'm grateful for. And I really am grateful, even when I go downtown to see the demonstrators. Trust me, as you may know, there are a number of people down there that are not Black and not brown, but they're saying this is my issue too, which reminds me of what Miss Coretta Scott King used to tell me all the time, that what made the civil rights movement what it was not just the participation among Black people, but it was of our white allies, our friends in the unions, the Jewish community, and so many others, when we all come together and recognize that, as Dr. King said, where there's injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, then it means that we're all going to get there together.
Okay, good. You know, as you were sharing this thought with you, what came to mind to me when we initially got involved with Black Lives Matter, and as far as downtown protesting and elsewhere around the country, protesting was already happening. When the president of the United States was first elected, that's when it all started. It all started. And it was the media that basically put them together. When it couldn't ignore it, if you will, the fact that the way, as you say, with this policeman with his knee on his, and it went worldwide, if you will.
It did.
It became an issue. And if you had dark skin, light dark, or 1/8 or whatever, guess what? I mean, everybody felt that knee on their neck. And then it came back to the U.S. and excuse the French, but thank goodness for the president, he made sure he was up the front line.
Well, on that same line, I had friends of mine calling or texting or emailing from Germany, London, Hong Kong, Tokyo. I mean, people literally were in the streets and still are to some degree all over the world. To them, this was not just a U.S. issue. It really did affect people all over the world. And I think that's great.
And if the masses hadn't participated, and it just so happened the masses did participate, had the masses not participated, we wouldn't have nothing on Black Lives. Black Lives Matter has always been an issue since Lincoln days.
That's right.
So, and there's never been a solution. So indirectly, it's a positive thing as far as I'm concerned. But people need to know, but don't use it as a negative because of on the other side, if you will, because we've got other issues that are on the table, and it just so happens there's other people. And I think that, in all due respect, I sort of fault the media, if you want to share that thought with me, but I tend to fault the media in many ways in terms of the communication, how they define this piece. And you need the media. I'm part of that media piece.
Right.
That's why I'm sharing it the way I'm sharing it. You know what I mean? Because it does matter. And we do have issues. We do have racism in this state. We have racism in this city. You got me? That's systemic racism and whatever. I mean, that's been my platform ever since I've run for office in this city. And not to say that, hey, I'm just sitting up there with a chip on my shoulders every day. No, we just have to deal with the issue. That's all. Okay? Any thoughts?
I think that's right, because quite frankly, one of the things that I'm probably the proudest of is the ability for us to get interfaith leaders all around the state of Oregon to come together and realize that even in the faith community, that we have not done our part either. And we have begun a 9-month odyssey. For every 2 weeks, we're getting together 42 cohorts around the state of Oregon to really deal with listening, learning, and engaging when it comes to racial injustice and to bring down barriers. And originally, there were 160 people who signed up. And our first meeting was 2 weeks ago. We had 160 people. The second meeting was this past Tuesday. We had over 215 people that were in various groups to learn. And in this case, we were learning about Native Americans, but we also are dealing with African Americans, the history of Oregon, which wanted this to be a white utopia, as you well know. Even when we were a territory in 1844, even in statehood, that people wanted this to remain that way. And if you saw somebody black on the street, beat them up to try to encourage them to leave this place. Same is true in terms of how policing got started and everything else. But quite frankly, even in faith communities, there are several barriers. There have been put in place specifically and intentionally to continue the issues of racism and injustice. And today, one of the things I can say, I can't speak for every state, but I know for us, this is something that we are continuing to work on, and we expect to keep this going at least this process for the next 9 months. And quite frankly, we're looking out a couple of years to make sure that we make progress. So we're teaching right now. People are learning things. I'm writing a dissertation at George Fox, finishing my doctoral work, and saying that, look, this is serious stuff, and people need to be able to engage without being shamed for what they haven't done. Because there are times when we think about even our history on this group of us here. Believe me, there's some of the young people, and I love them for this, but we're trying to teach them because they said, you guys failed. I was so happy when a white guy, probably in his 60s or 70s, said, don't say that the generation before you failed. The white power structure was so strong that it decided that there was only going to be so much that black people and brown people were going to win when it came to civil rights. He said, but right now, this is the time for everybody to come together and to make real the promises of democracy, the promises of Dr. King's dream, the promises of the beloved community.
Great. Another major area of concern was prior to the whole issue of the presidential election and also Black Lives Matter was the homeless issue aspect of it. And the churches have always been reaching out, if you will, to the poor, whether it's been finance or food or this, that, and the other, but it was about the homeless issue. Indirectly, you could be living in a home and still be homeless aspect of it. And the church was always a place of you could go to and talk to solving some of those problems, eating and whatever. And I think about Clara Peoples. Remember this is people, the People's, when they talk about the People's Bank, food bank, I think about Clara Peoples. Should rename it. In fact, you ought to give that some thought, the possibility of lobbying that in there.
I think that makes sense. I mean, here's the thing. We often say, boy, the homeless situation is getting worse. Guess what? If we look at it deeply, what we have to remember is the chasm between the haves and the have-nots have just gotten worse. That's part of what's going on. The 1% are doing very, very well. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they have, if you trend it, they started doing well right after the banking crash of 2008, 2009. And what you saw all the way through President Obama's term and really through this term of Mr. Trump is that those who have gotten a heck of a lot more, and those who had not are losing an awful lot more. And so you have a system that's in place right now that from a taxation standpoint, an employment standpoint, a business standpoint, and all of that stuff, that really does not help and give a hand up to the person on the bottom. America's headed to a place right now, if we stay on this course, and I pray that we will get ourselves off this course, but if we remain on this course, there'll be no middle class. We will be like many other countries where they're rich and they're poor, and there are very few people in the middle. And what we really need to do is go back and look at this economic a contract really that we have going on in this country, and remind ourselves, and again, I'm not trying to be mean to the president, but if there's any truth to the New York Times article where he paid no taxes for 10 years, and for the last 2 years that we know about, he paid $715 or something. I'm like, how could you run for president knowing that even in a business partnership, if that's all you bring into the table, I got news for you. You will not be a partner. And I really think it's important that we understand that when people even criticize President Obama, President or Vice President Biden, and they're saying, well, he wants to raise taxes on you. I would like to say that, again, I'm a business person too. I don't mind paying my fair share, but I also people must know that there aren't near as many deductions that a poor person can take than a rich person. Plain and simple. Rich person can do a whole lot of things to shelter their income and to create as many opportunities not to pay taxes than people who really don't have. And that's just a reality, and that's a truth. And when you think about that, that feeds the homeless problem. because people do not, number one, mental health issues, because most of the people you're going to find on the street, they are impacted by mental health. That's one of the first things. The second thing is that people have no hope, and they've got family members who've kicked them out. They've lost their jobs. They've not, been able to really develop skills to be able to survive. And those kind of things we have to take into account. So finally, I would say on this score, part of what we're doing at Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, we have something called Second Home, where homeless young people are matched with families that while these kids are in juniors and seniors in high school, so they can quit couch surfing and they can quit living in their cars or somebody else's car, and they can actually be connected to a family. We've been doing that work for the last 3 or 4 years, and I'm really grateful for it. We also have another program called Metro Home Share, where adults who are homeless but want to come together and share together a unit of housing that is off the street. That's big time stuff. And I'll also say the Harbor of Hope, doing an absolutely fabulous job. Don Mazziotti and Homer Williams and Lisa, I can't remember Lisa's last name right now, but the Mirandas, they're doing a huge job of finding shelter for people, of creating opportunities for them to take showers and stuff like that. And I have to tell you, anecdotally, oftentimes we've got people who want to sleep outside our church, whether it's up on the riser or down in the and I don't get in their way at all. I don't. They're fine. But ultimately, we have to make a priority to do what we can to really help balance the imbalance in terms of opportunity. And we must work with our homeless population and quit trying to make decisions for them, but sit down and have listening sessions and find out from them what's on their minds and why they're in the position they're in, and then work with them to try to help make decisions rather than just decide decisions on their own. Here's the last thing, preachers always have 3 closes. So this is my second close. A number of young people who are literally homeless because they didn't want to follow mom and dad's instruction, and so they found themselves out on the street. And I told them, one of the things you need to know, you're going to be an adult long enough that as long as you can have 3 squares and be at home with mom and dad, you better learn how to be able to handle that, because when you get out there to be an adult, you're going to deal with far more than that.
With due respect, everybody's going home now. Times are tough. Now, what about police? It's always been a major factor in the Black community. Always has been. And I do know that you've got the Jacksons go to Vancouver Avenue Baptist, Harry and his brother and other Marines, and there's a sister that goes there. She's retired. And I know all those Marines, those folks down there. You don't think? That's why I got my hat up on the pew. Anyway, but the bottom line, what about police? What have we improved the situation, or is it still there? And what's going to happen with this whole issue?
Well, as you know, when you talk about police and community, it's a very complicated issue. On the one hand, and I've been leading the Interfaith Peace and Action Collaborative for the last 4.5 years, every other Friday, working with the police, with faith leaders, community people, business folks, and anybody is open. Our doors are open for anybody who wants to be a part of this conversation. They can. Number one, I think we miss sometimes the policing is not an easy issue. It just isn't. Number two, we miss the fact that this particular, our police bureau answers 350,000 calls every year, of which only less than 1% of those calls end up in a use of force. Use of force defined also not just pulling your gun or taser or something like that, but also raising your voice. So on the one hand, there are many good things that happen with our police, but the flashpoints are what most people know. And I've talked with many people in the community who assume, when I ask them the question, how many calls do you think end up in use of force? Most people say 50%, but they are shocked when I say right around between 1% and 2%. And it is shocking for people, because what folks need to know is that a majority of calls are the police going to things they shouldn't be going to, which is handling the issues of mental health. That's not their role. Thirdly, we've got some good police officers. We really do. I know that all of your panelists know that. But we also have some bad apples. And I've said to people before, we've got some bad apples in the clergy. We've got bad apples in the medical field, the health field, the education field, you name it, we do. Everywhere but the media, Bruce, are some bad apples.
Really?
But the point is, we need to work harder at trying to understand each other, because the role of police and the role of community has often been an unfortunate flashpoint because it's not clear. Now, again, some people appreciate what I'm saying, others will not like it. I was the public safety director for the city of Saginaw, Michigan. So I dealt with police and fire for 4.5 years, and then I served as a city manager.
We're going to take a short break, and if you'd like to join, welcome back to the Oregon Voters Digest. Hopefully you've been enjoying the first half of the show. We have the gallery right there, and we intend to would like to get the gallery to respond to our guests, who happen to have been Pastor Hennessee. If there was any points that we want to maybe share some thoughts on, we can do that at this point in time. And if there's any other things that we'd like to do, we can do that also too. So with that, why don't we just open this up and go right to the issue that's major in the city's mind, right? Is the protesting issue aspect of it. Pastor made it very clear that he has no problem with the protesting, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, that as long as it's orderly and this, that, and the other, and as you note, one of the things that we had said about the area was that it's gotten into neighborhoods now, and this, that, and the other, and we've been looking for sites, if you will, that we can maybe designate, if you will. We just recently had at the demonstration piece about 2 weeks ago, about 2 weeks or so ago, with the Proud Boys and whatever, and we had 3 different protesting during daylight hours, and they were orderly done. They were in parks, 3 different parks, which came to mind, which is another discussion that we had, is that we felt that very strongly that there should be permits, that every march or every protest had to have a permit, someone responsible enough to take out the permit. What that does is that it gives the person the opportunity to go before city council, i.e. with the media there, to educate and define just exactly what is this going to do to our way of living here in the Portland metro area. We also included, and I threw it out there to a certain degree, was that we felt that it should be bonded because things are being torn down. And at the end of the day, guess who picks up the tab? The citizens, people who are not even involved in the process. And we're already hurting for money, this, that, and the other. So the name of the game is that it needs to be bonded. So if the person can't bond, but there's an outside source that wants to support that piece, they can do that. So then it gets taken care of. And then hopefully we can have the protesting at the 3 designated sites that we just recently used, the various parks. I mean, we got a parks commission, and the bottom line is that we can use those parks. But besides that, the downtown piece at night, no night protesting, for the safety of all. Safety of everybody that was protesting, even now, the looters, the whole 9 yards, the safety. People get shot, and this, that, and the other. I mean, they're already wearing masks, and and the Lone Ranger is not there. I mean, that kind of deal. So the bottom line is that those are some of the little comments I'm just throwing in, kind of bring things up, and just sort of let the pastor know what we have been discussing over the last few weeks or so in regards to this whole issue of protesting. So why don't we start off with the one and only Fred. Fred, why don't we start off with you to lead off on the protesting piece? And you had the opportunity to hear what the pastor said, and as one would say, you have the updates, if you will, now. And what are your thoughts? Going on.
I'm not in disagreement with anything that the pastor said about the protest. I agree 100%. The only thing I'm at odds with, and we've talked about this before, is that because law enforcement has been so hamstringed, we've had people of not good intentions for our community, people who don't even live here in Oregon. I mean, I was talking to a cop. He happens to be the son of somebody I went to high school with, which is just freaky for a guy like me. Everybody he's arrested, and he's arrested like 40 people, not one of them had an Oregon address. Not one. And they're out here doing destruction. He says it's not the people from Portland that's out destroying things and trying to hurt people, trying to hurt me. It's people who are coming here in planes, trains, and autos, you know, and they feel hamstringed. And I think we need leadership to address that, not to stop the protest, but to make the protest safe for all, you know, and everything the pastor said was right. These people are not even from here, and they're destroying our businesses, our buildings. They're hurting Oregonians. And the people that we invest in to protect us from that, they're not doing that. It's not 100% their fault. You know, it's the politics of the time. It's the lack of leadership. You know, it's the lack of people willing to stand up and saying, we're not going to tolerate this. I mean, I'm glad we're doing this for racism. I mean, I'm glad, in my lifetime, I'm seeing people stand up. You know, Pastor, I do real estate all over the state, and it blows me away when I'm in Roseburg or Cottage Grove or Grants Pass, where I'm like usually the only black person in the ever, you know what I mean? And I'm seeing people wearing Black Lives t-shirts. And, I do think this is a great moment in time, but we do have some people who are up to no good, and they are on the right and they're on the left. I don't see this as being a left issue or a right issue. And they're coming into our hometown, our home state, and they're causing problems. And I just hope that something happens in the near future, because I think whatever happens on election day, whether Trump wins or Biden wins, we're going to see some stuff, unfortunately. I don't think it matters. I mean, you could argue one will be more aggressive than the other. You know, it hasn't happened yet. No matter what, we've got issues that we're going to have to deal with. And I just hope that somebody that we've elected stands up and stands up for us. And at the same time, don't get in the way of people earnestly trying to push change. I think it's a major statement that we have got so many people wearing Black Lives Matter shirts, putting Black Lives Matter signs in their homes, showing up to these protests that don't look like me, don't look like Pastor Hennessee. And I don't want them hurt. I don't want none of them hurt. I don't want anybody hurt, except maybe the people who are up to no good.
Okay.
And unfortunately, they're not getting hurt. That's why they're coming here.
All right, buddy. Thank you. Tell you what, we're going to do fine. We'll get back to you again. Jack, how about you? Your response to protest.
Well, I particularly appreciated Pastor Hennessy's comment of building bridges and talking about developing the dialogue. And that comment harkened back to the previous or several commissioners before, police chiefs before, Police Chief Outlaw, who once gave a speech talking about building bridges. And I thought that was a very compelling speech and talk she gave, trying to build bridges with the community. Unfortunately, America, perhaps the world, has a history to love our heroes and to hate our villains. I remember, Bruce, as you know, when you and I both came back from Vietnam, there were protesters when I was discharged out of Fort Lewis that spit on me when I was in the Seattle airport because they perceived, because I was a veteran, I was a villain. And I'll always be grateful, actually, for President Obama, who wrote a letter thanking our veterans for their service and saying, unfortunately, people who had strong opposition to the war just didn't realize what the real issues were. And I'll always be grateful for that. I see that today with our police. I've been asking for the last 20 or 30 years for our police to do more and more. And to be candid, we have positioned our police departments across the United States for absolute failure. Can you find one person who can be an expert in mental health, be also an expert in disarming someone or in violence or dealing domestic situations? The jobs have become increasingly difficult to the point of impossible for one individual, even a small group of individuals. So when we talk about police, if we're talking about giving assistance and broadening the capabilities to keep our cities safe such as the response team that they're using in Salem, which I believe they call the Cahoots program, which has been operating for over a decade and proven to be effective and is now embraced by the local police. I say absolutely, that's proven to be a technique that's there. But it breaks my heart when I see a Black police officer interviewed on YouTube who says that he's been approached by Black protesters several times when he's been standing out there trying to maintain order, and people run up to the other person when they try and speak to him, who are also young Black people, and told, oh, you can't talk to him, he's the police. We have to stop the hate. We have to build bridges. And that's what we need leaders to do, is to build those bridges.
Thanks very much, Jack. Okay, Pastor Minnieweather, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing totally fine. Doing totally fine.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, what do you think?
I think about the process over my 20 years of being a pastor in the community, not as much as in the narrative of what the pastors do in the city, but being on the ground level and dealing with those that are really out here with the mental health, really out here with the addictions. And what I've been doing and want to proceed to continue to do is be a bridge between faith and those people on the street that have lost faith in the church, have lost faith in the police. They lost faith in a lot of things that we used to be able to trust in our community and rely on and fall back. And that's why I appreciate Pastor Hennessee and the work he continues to do, because it continues to show them that we are diverse in faith. We are different. We all have different parts that we play. And no one's not necessary. We're all necessary to build a bridge. You know, there's no bridge without bolts and steel, and everything's a little different, but it makes a bridge. And I just am, excited to be a part of doing what I'm doing in the homeless community. And what I was hearing with him is like, that's a big bridge that, a lot of people are trying to cross right now. And I'm trying to get shower stations out at Delta Park. I'm trying to get just everything I can for that community. Was just out there yesterday. We gave out what they call the pit buckets that come from Union Gospel Mission. And we went out and we served the community. And I'm just like, I'm like Fred in the issue of saying, okay, well, it's cool when Portland say what Portland talking about, but that ain't Portland talking. That's somebody talking for us coming into the city and want to say what Portland want. And if they were to just really take the time to realize how many people are in here tearing up, doing the work that they doing, they got knowing that I'm 60 years from here. I'm not 60 years from Denver to here. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. This is where I come from. And then to see somebody come in from Minneapolis and a group of people come in from these places and try to tell us what to do over here. You ain't even been over here. You don't even know what we do over here. But it's our job, again, is to be like just a voice for those who don't have a voice. There's a lot of people that want to talk that can't talk. And they need us, the pastors, they need the community, they need the police, they need us all to come together and figure out what terms can we put together that's going to help us assist one another, not be against one another, but assist one another in whatever area Hennessee is in. I want to assist. I don't want to be that. I just want to see if I can help. And whatever I do, he should do. And same thing with old Jack, my buddy Jack. If he can help, he should help. Fred, if you can help, you should help. Bruce, if you should help, and that's where we got to get back to that. Got to get back to all hands on deck with everybody being serious about the mission of saving Oregon, saving Portland, our city, where we're at right now.
Thank you very, very much. Well, now, Reverend, I tell you what, we're going to bring you back onto the table here with this group aspect of it, because in all due respect, you're in the people business aspect of it. You're communicating to them and educating them for the following week, if you will, so they can survive and get back, if you will, on an ongoing basis, take care of their families and this, that, and the other. Well, now we're right in the midst, if you will, of an election aspect of it. And the kind of a person that needs to be somewhat similar to your capacity, being up there at the diocese, if you will, and educating them and telling them what it takes, if you will, and offsetting their stresses and things of that nature. What would you share with the viewing audience as far as now they're having to make a selection and make a decision as to who should they vote for here within the city of Portland? Got me? And just kind of, if you don't mind, just giving them some idea of not necessarily the folks who are running for office, but what they should be looking for in a person as far as the leadership that Fred talks to. Okay?
No, I appreciate that. First of all, let me just say that I'm inspired and particularly appreciative of all the comments that have been made by Fred and Jack and Pastor Minnieweather, because again, as Pastor Minnieweather said, it takes all of us. And I feel very strongly about that. And again, I'm grateful for the great work that each of them are doing. In terms of who we need as the mayor, one of the things I recall right after the primary season was over, I heard the sitting mayor, the incumbent mayor, say something about, I'm going to focus on homelessness, right? I think that's a big issue, but I sent a text to him and said, your job is bigger than homelessness. You need to deal with the issues of race in this city, and I've been saying that for a long time. Your job is to make sure that you are creating economic opportunity for people, and that you are doing your job to make sure that all of these issues of friction between the Black and brown community and police, that we really get closer. And it's not just saying we don't have gangs, or we're going to dismantle this, or we're going to defund that. I think it's important that you get down to the brass tacks and say, how do communities in Portland want to be policed? And I've lived on the west side, the north side, the northeast side, and my church is right at the cusp of North and Northeast Portland. Williams Avenue is what divides North and Northeast. And the fact is, there is a difference in how we police in North and Northeast and how we police in Southeast and Southwest and everything else. And I think it's really important that we do that. So we need a mayor who's going to be strong. We need a mayor, because of the kind of government we have, that they've got to have 2 more votes with them, because if they don't have 2 more votes, they're going to be ineffective anyway. And they've got to be a person who really is able to handle the complexity of what it's like to run this city, which is part of the reason why the last 3 or 4 people that have been the mayor have only been 1 term. Our sister and friend, who God bless her memory, Vera Katz, was 13 years, I believe, as our mayor, and she did, I think, a tremendous job. But it takes a mayor who can listen to people, who has a vision, who also has a strong backbone, and is not pulled and swayed by, this and that and the other. They really need to be centered in what they want to do. But in my view, they've really got to focus on those things of homelessness is definitely a big issue, economic empowerment and opportunity, education, the issues between police and community is big, and the opportunity to create housing for people in this area that's affordable and really bring this city together. There's no reason. We've been, all of us, talking about bridges tonight. That's one of the biggest things that needs to happen here. I'm shocked sometimes when I realize how many times, and I think all of us have the same experience, white people can live in this city all their life and never have to deal with Black and brown people. Black people and brown people cannot live in this city and not deal with white people. It's just plain and simple as that. And it's very important that we get to really intentionally learn how to work together and understand each other, not from a shaming standpoint, from a standpoint of growing, developing the next generation.
It sounds good. Pastor Minnieweather, you've been dealing with the little folks there on, the young people and this, that, and the other. What would be your response? The kind of folks.
Again, it's just like I said, it's just them seeing us united in a way. The younger people that are coming around me right now, they're like, hey man, what's going on with the leaders? What's happening with the elders, man? What's going? And a lot of times we think that they're not concerned with what we are. A lot of times we disconnect so easily, not understanding that they're still looking towards us. They're still expecting something, even though they're acting out, even though they're going through, they're still looking for somebody to say, like in the back, in the day when we grew up, somebody say, hey, young blood, come here. They're still looking for somebody to say, hey, young man, come here, and have those same dialogues. And I say to anyone who wants to lead that younger community, you just got to open up and really take the time to say, hey, come here. Just come here and let me hear you. Let me see what you're talking about. And let me see how much I can help push that narrative or that agenda to where it needs to be. So more of you young people are comfortable talking. Because the more we hear about what the frustration is, more that we hear about where the neglect is, and we won't have to use a term that we use called at-risk youth, but we don't want to know what they're at risk of. Come on, I mean, we can say it all week, at-risk youth, but what are they at risk of? And some are just at risk of coming from a drug fiend house, having parents that are in prison, having an uncle that sells drugs. It's a lot of things that they come from, and we have to be more sensitive instead of just labeling them a bad group of people. Like, we know what that is, because that happens in every culture. They'll say these guys, the police are bad, the blacks are bad. But when you label a whole group, you take the essence of what is the prosperity or the beauty of a culture or people, when you just start to look at the negative ones and make your narrative or your agenda be from the negativity. And I think that's what the young people are. They're saying the scene's so negative. You guys see them so negative. Everybody, they don't know what to do. They don't know who to turn to, because first thing it is, they're the problem. And they're like, well, man, I don't feel like I'm the problem. I feel like I got one. Like, how do I feed my kids? How do I, what about the education thing? I got to sell a little drugs. What do I do? And I'm like, well, bro, listen, only thing I can tell you is that we got to get you to a table with them. Mm-hmm. We got to get you to a table with them. So that's what the young people, I got some young people just want to have a table. They don't want to be on the mic downtown. They don't want to cuss and yell from downtown and be a part. They want to sit with the people and say what they really see for their community and what's lacking. And I think that's the step, and I'm appreciating Pastor Hennessee just for knowing that that's a big area of making sure that they're feeling comfortable, they're feeling safe, and they feel like they have a place that they can unload that stuff.
Good. Jack, I want to bring you in because you just recently ran for city commissioner, Nick Fisher's seat, and aspect of it. You were knocking on those doors. I know you were knocking on those doors. Even when COVID-19 was out there, you knocked on my door.
Yes.
And got me to the point I've got you sitting here now, making you a main factor hosting this show. Because I really admire you for doing what you've done and actually getting out and knocking on the doors of these folks. And you really did your homework. And so what were you hearing out there as far as the kind of leadership they were looking for?
Well, what I heard time and time again, and I spent more time east of the river than I did anywhere else, primarily because what I heard from people is they felt that City Hall was disconnected from the people. And I asked the question, what's keeping a city commissioner from holding a town hall meeting like our state house or senators do? And they looked and they said no. Well, I said, well, I promise that on at least twice a month, I'll be out in different sectors. I want to hear the problems. And that's what I consistently heard. I also heard from the business community. The city government just looks at businesses as an ATM machine. I heard complaints from people that were trying to build affordable housing, all the different taxes and fees that were put on things. There was building of infill housing that a group was trying to build, 2 smaller houses on a big lot that had been from a house that built 100 years ago. And they subdivided it in 2 smaller houses, 1,200-foot house and then I think 1,000-foot house. Not a big house in southeast Valence area. Okay. Well, by the time the permitting fees were $52,000 were handed in, and then they had to tear down the existing sidewalk and put in a new enhanced sidewalk, a new street light. That was $150,000. And in doing this, they had to cut down 2 trees. And then the Parks Department came by and fined them $60,000 for cutting down those trees. They've added $300,000, actually more than $300,000, onto what would have been modestly priced smaller homes. And so we've got to recognize that our city isn't working together and they're just driving up the cost. The latest statistics that I saw, and as a scientist, I love data, is our cost of living in our state is number 4 in the US. We're behind Hawaii and California, and I believe New York State. And when we arrived here and moved here, when I finished and retired in 2011, I think our cost of living was maybe 23rd, 24th. And now housing prices have gone through the roof for a lot of reasons. But there are things that we can do to change that. We have a traffic problem because people are moving further and further out simply because they can't afford a house in the city. And there's steps that you can do to rectify that. And if you bring the people back into the city, guess what? They won't need to be driving from Oregon City. They'll be driving 4 or 5 blocks or walking 4 or 5 blocks, hopefully, from that standpoint. So there are things that we can do if we look globally on things that have worked successfully in other cities. And I've lived in Europe and Asia and Australia and worked extensively in Africa and South America. And every place I took something from that. And you need to look at the analogs around the world to try and find the solution to these problems. But we need a city council that doesn't have a pre-written agenda, that wants to solve the problem of making our city better, building bridges with people, helping people's way of life, creating jobs, helping young people, particularly young people, to get out of their low income, particularly low income areas. I grew up, I think if you called where I grew up, you might call it poor, since I had the scenic view of a condemned coal mine in front of my house and railroad tracks. And I was told by my two high school teachers that my kind, Native Americans, shouldn't think about going to university. My kind ought to go to technical school or do something like that. Well, I'm just not a very cooperative kind of person, so I didn't particularly like that, and I just ignored it. But from that standpoint, we need help, and we need to encourage people. We need to stop the polarizing hate, and we need, as a city, to come together, left, right, in between. And all lives do matter, Pastor. I agree 100%. But let's make sure we listen to the Black community and the underrepresented communities to understand the issues they're facing, because they're different than people with lighter skin.
Thanks very much, Jack. Well, Fred, I tell you what, I think the area I would like for you to share is basically the whole issue of city planners. You know what I mean? We're building, for instance, we did have a District 18 in the Northeast Portland corridor, Black community, and it was building, and we were basically gearing up, if you will, to make sure that people were elected to office and things of that nature, and then talk to home ownership, which you worked in, Fred, quite a bit, and making sure that these homes were sold, and in many ways giving the opportunities to people of color, and that was very, very important. But now you're all over the city. For that matter, you're selling homes like it's going out of style. I know that. In fact, you know that business. And are we moving in the right direction? I mean, the fact high rise, there's no respect, if you will, from the standpoint of parking for these facilities, this, that, and the other. There's a bunch of high rises, and there's a lot of people complaining about that kind of stuff. Are we moving in the right direction? Talk about the whole issue of
no, we're not moving in the right direction, Bruce. We are moving in a direction, like I've said before, where we're building a city for wealthy people who haven't moved here yet. Period. The people that we've got on city council, all of them since Vera Katz, every single one of them have all been part of this game. And we've allowed them to get away with it because we keep voting for them. Why do you think I get so upset about Chloe Eudaly and rent control? I mean, San Francisco right now, Bruce, is walking away from rent control. You know one of the reasons why they're walking away from rent control? Because when they brought rent control in, and you can look up the data yourself, they had over 100,000 Black people living in San Francisco. And you know they're debating about whether that number is going to be between 20 and 30 or 30 and 40,000 now. And guess what? The Black people that live in San Francisco are among the wealthiest, on average, Black people in the United States. So you know what that is saying? In order for a Black person to play that game, to live in San Francisco, they've got to be wealthy. So they're like, for the Black community, they're the 1% of the 1%. Get my meaning? And so we get these white people, and I say they're white people not because I don't like white people. Most of the people I love on planet Earth, unfortunately, is white. I grew up in Oregon. You know what I mean? Just to be honest, most of the people that I love and love me are white. So when I talk like this, I'm not anti-white, but we get these white people, these former skinheads that can get on our city council and come up with policy and lie to our poor people and say, hey, listen to me. I got this policy that's going to help you. And oh, by the way, so what? The Black people are being kicked out of Portland. It's not a big deal. We got to stop this. We got to start paying attention to what people are telling us. And results has got to matter. You understand? We're so comfortable as long as the results don't affect us. You know, so many people, it's like, well, I ain't got nothing to worry about. I'm okay. Well, what about your neighbor? You know, it hurts me, guys, watching a lot of the people that I see around Lowerhurst Park and the Walmart out there in Southeast Portland who are living in their SUVs and they got jobs. They got jobs. I watched a house last week, a small house in Selwood. It was built in the back of another house, and they separated the lot. It's only 800 square feet. It only went for a mere $500,000. That's all. And, you know, somebody in downtown on city council, they're probably thinking that's a good thing. But you know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about when I grew up and when I used to go into Selwood and the type of families that lived there. And I understand that those families can't be there anymore unless they didn't sell. You understand? They're not going to buy into that neighborhood anymore when somebody can sell their backyard for $500,000. You know, and we don't have anybody, I don't even hear anybody who's running for city council but Mingus even talk about that. They don't even act like what's going on is a bad thing. They won't even admit that maybe we've made some mistakes. That's where all of us comes in. That's why it's important that we start holding people accountable when their results fail us. I know all lives matter, and I agree with what Pastor Hennessee said. There's nothing anybody has said here that I disagree with. The only thing I will say is we got to start holding people who don't live up to those values accountable. Results matter. What Dwight said about black kids being at risk, I've always agreed with that. Now, look, I don't pay attention to that when I'm selling houses. When I was trying to clean up Northeast Portland, I was trying to make the area safer for the people I love, starting with my mom, and I don't care what was going on. But it's not like I didn't know what got them there. You get my meaning? Mm-hmm. So what's the solution? There are things we can do that we're not doing, where these issues aren't an issue for us. We're a small, big city. We've got what it takes, if we utilize it, to have this utopia, and not just a utopia for white people that are rich. We could develop right here in this city a utopia for people of all races, of all economic values. The last thing I'm going to end on this, guys, I want you to think about this, about how our downtown Portland was developed. When Mr. Pettygrove and those guys were dividing up and creating downtown Portland, you ever wonder why our blocks are so short? They made our blocks shorter so they could fit more people in, so there would be more opportunities for everyone. That's how Portland used to think.
Got about a minute.
How can this be a win-win situation for everyone? You know what I mean? We don't have that thinking anymore. We don't have people thinking, how can we do something where more people can be involved, where everybody can win? I want to hear leaders talk like that. I don't want to hear leaders talk about, well, we can leave those people behind because I don't like them very much. Mm-hmm. Get my meaning? The only people I don't like are the people trying to hurt my family, my friends, and my community. Outside of that, I think I'm open door, and I think most of us are that way. The problem is we don't vote that way. We tend to vote for people who don't necessarily reflect the values that we all share. And we got to stop doing that, guys. We live in a great city. We're full of awesome people. We got to start acting like it.